Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome on board every colleague, either with us on the Facebook tonight or inside the Zoom meeting. I would like to welcome my dear colleague, Dr. Hisham Samir Abdurrahman Al-Haggagi, and his share tonight in the last lecture of a brief or basic knowledge of medical education. And we're continuing what we started the week before last. And he will go quickly on the Richard Mayer theory of medical education. We'll pass by the fonts and colors, plus. So welcome again, Dr. Hisham, and best of luck with your My Egypt Academy, all workshops and courses you're running. You're renovating the look to our fields in anesthesia and critical care. So best of luck with your new setups and your new courses. You can start sharing your presentation, please, Dr. Hisham, and you're absolutely free
Walid,
to start.
for inviting me on your amazing academy, life-saving academy. Today, inshallah, we'll continue what we started last time about the guidelines for the medical presentations. I believe the last time we talked about the assertion evidence approach, and we talked about the details of it and how to use the assertion evidence approach in the scientific or medical presentations. I believe we talked about the fonts guidelines, but we'll go through it very quickly today, just as review. And then we'll have a discussion about the color guidelines, inshallah. And then after that, as you mentioned, we'll go through Richard Mayer theory. It's a little bit complicated theory, so I want to go in it in a way that makes it easy. But at the same time, I don't want it to be so complicated for your audience, inshallah. Also, inshallah, today we'll try to focus on some of the practical stuff that we can use in PowerPoint and make your presentation or anyone's presentation much easier, inshallah. I hope it will not be a long presentation, and it will be light and fun for everyone, inshallah. All right, we'll start now with, I believe the best thing to do is starting with a review of the fonts guidelines. So I just would like someone to confirm if we have a good sound and a good view of the presentation, just to start with.
Yeah, I can see the presentation and hear you well, Dr. Hisham. Please go ahead.
Good. All right, so guidelines for the text, as we mentioned the last time, is first thing, you need your text to be bigger. All right, and when we talk about the bigger text, we talk about the, this is the usual PowerPoint slide where we have the title usually sitting around 44 points, or the size is 44. And we usually have the bullets, which is 22 and 18 for the sub bullets. This kind of fonts is very, very small for the audience to recognize and to read, easy during the presentation. So the guidelines for the medical presentation or any presentation is to avoid the usual PowerPoint fonts and go for a bigger font. So if you're talking about the bigger fonts, we'll have to talk about the headlines, which we usually sitting between 36 to 60 using a bolded font. If you're going to use the text on the slide body itself, it's good to use it between 24 and 36 points, either bolded or unbolded. And then we have the references, which you're going to have to put under your slide or at the bottom of your slide, usually sitting between 12 and 18 points. Just to make it easy for myself to remember it, I usually go with the headlines between 60. So I usually put my headline 60, my slide body 36, and my reference 14. This is usually how I go with it. This is how it will look like in our guidelines. So you'll have a title between 50 and 60, as we said. Instead of this title, it will be bolded. And then you will have the bullets between 34, like this. You can also bold part of it and the other part make it unbolded. By this way, you make the slide much more easy to be read by the audience, inshallah, as you see, compared to the other slides. So we said first thing is to make it bigger. Second thing is you want to use the sans serif typeface. So as you notice here, we have two different stuff. We have typeface, which is different than fonts. As we all of us know what the meaning of the fonts, we will make it more clear because apparently we are a little bit confused between typefaces and fonts, Dr. Walid. Also, we have the sans serif. We need to understand what's the meaning of sans serif. So in any font, usually in the fonts in PowerPoint, it's divided into serif and sans serif. As you can see, the end of the letters here, there's a little bit of extra shape or extra kind of extension of the letter. This is called serif font. Example of it is the Times font that we usually find in the PowerPoint. On the other side, we have the sans serif font, which doesn't have this extension here. So sans means not or doesn't. So sans serif, it means without serif or doesn't have the serif. And this is example of it is the Arial one that we see in the PowerPoint. So in our point guidelines, especially when you're doing medical presentations, we prefer to use the sans serif, means the fonts that doesn't have the extra shapes at the end of it. When we come to typefaces, what we call fonts in our mind is actually called typefaces in PowerPoint. So we have the Arial typeface, we have the Calibri typeface, we have the Century Gothic typeface. All these are typefaces. Under these typefaces, we have multiple fonts. So for example, if we have a typeface, Comic Sans or Times New Roman, or Futura, which is a typeface, under Futura, there is a lots of fonts. This is what we call fonts. So fonts, so let's say typeface is the big surname of the family or the big name of the family. And under it, we have multiple fonts. So for example, if we have Futura, we have Futura Bold Oblique, for example, Futura Condensed Bold, Futura Condensed Bold Oblique, and so on. So our guidelines in the PowerPoint is basically saying that we should use one typeface, but we can use multiple fonts from the same typeface. So for example, if I'm going to use the heading, let's say I will use the Futura, I will use the heading Futura Extra Bold, for example. The rest of the slide, I may use Futura Extra Bold Oblique. Or I can use Futura Extra Bold and Futura Condensed Bold. Whatever belongs to the same typeface, I can use in my presentation. Try to avoid using more than 2 or 3 typefaces in your whole presentation. Moving on in the font guidelines, we mentioned the last time that we have to create a font hierarchy. So as I said, if you're going to use the headline, special typeface, let's say size 60, you have to maintain this hierarchy in all your slides. So you have to use the same typeface, the same font, the same size in all the headings in all of your slides. So this is the usual PowerPoint way, which is titles, bullets, sub-bullets. In our way, instead of using bullets and sub-bullets, we'll differentiate the headings and the subheadings by using the bolding, the different text size, and the different colors. This is how we put the hierarchy for the slide. Instead of using the usual way, which is titles, bullets, and some bullets, we'll just make it differentiated by the text size, the colors, and the bolding. I believe we talked about this in details the last time, so I don't want really to consume the presentation today on the same thing, but one of the important stuff that we need to use also or to avoid is italics or underlying and all caps. So this is an example of all caps. You shouldn't be writing your headlines in all caps letters. That's not a nice way of doing it. Also, never underline your headings or your small subheadings. Never underline it. All these guidelines is according to the neuroscience and psychological researches. And
I
when
think
they
Dr.
mentioned that,
Hisham, yeah, I think Dr. Hisham, this is the very commonest two mistakes, is putting everything on bold and put underline when I want to highlight a line or two in my slides. Do you agree with that? Do you think
yeah, definitely,
it's
definitely.
common? Yeah.
It is common thing that we usually do, and I used to do it before, but then all the researchers now are saying that all these things actually slow down the reading and sometimes confuse the audience, and you don't want that to happen, because once your audience is confused or the reading is slow, they get detached from the presentation. So according to the guidelines, we shouldn't be doing these mistakes anymore, avoiding all caps, avoiding underlying all the important stuff as we think. There's other ways of doing it more clear in the presentation, which we'll talk about in a second, but definitely don't use the underline, don't use the all caps. That's very important. Also avoid the italics, Dr. Walid. Don't use the, the italics, which is kind of bent letters. This also doesn't help with the reading of your presentation. So just to summarize the guidelines for text very quickly: make it bigger, 60, 34, 14. This is how I put it for myself. Use a sans serif typefaces. Don't use the serif, use the sans serif typefaces. Create a font hierarchy and use the boldface. However, avoid the italics, underlying, and all caps. So these are the main guidelines for the text that we should be using in our presentations, inshallah.
Dr. Hisham, when you are talking about make it bigger, is that for every lecture, or if I am presenting in a hall or from a podium or in a stadium? So if I'm presenting online, like what we're doing now, does this rule still apply? Or it depends on how you present?
It definitely applies. So
Okay.
all these guidelines that I'm talking about, it comes from Richard Mayer's guidelines and the assertion evidence approach, and both of them are focusing on online presentations.
Okay.
So we use the same guidelines in everywhere. And as you see, if I show you, this is how it looks. So this is guidelines for text. This is written in 60, around 54 or 60 bold. And then all of these are 34. So as you can see, it's an online presentation and it's very clear. It's not that big. It's not that small. It will be the same for my audience also. They can see it from backwards. They can see it from wherever they're sitting. It should be used in both online and live presentations.
Fantastic. Very good. Thank you.
Good. All right. All right. Let's go through colors. Colors are very important, Dr. Walid, for medical presentations and any presentation. We can use colors to engage our audience. We can use colors to highlight the important points of your slide. Let's take an example. This is a graph that I'm presenting, and as you can see, it's totally in black and white. However, if I highlighted one of the bars with a different color, it makes it more clear for the audience instead of just making them all the same colors. Part of the guidelines of the colors is that we have to be consistent with the colors, and we have to use the color palette. We'll talk in details about the color palette and how to use the color palette, inshallah. This is the color palette. Usually to make your presentation looks nice and the colors kind of fits together, there's lots of theories for the colors. Complementary theories, analogs. Basically, it means that if you're using this color, for example, you can use the color that's beside it or the one that's following it. Or for example, in triad theory, you can use this color and then you can use the color sitting in opposite to it, or the color sitting on the side of it, like missing one of the bars. These theories are very hard to implement and very hard to understand, especially for someone who is having color problems like myself. I have lots of color blindness issues. So it's very hard for me to understand all these colors, and I can't even tell their names. And I can't see them as you guys. So this is a kind of a little bit hard thing to do. However, PowerPoint makes things much easier by putting a palette. So this is a color palette that you can see in the PowerPoint. Basically, what they've done is that they put the colors that can fit together in your presentation, and you can use them in your presentation comfortably, making sure that they will all fit together and your presentation will look nice. So if you're going to use multiple colors in the presentation, make sure you use the colors from this color palette. I will show you where to find this color palette. Saying that, the colors that they are using in the Microsoft PowerPoint is very, very old style of colors. And there's another way where you can add new colors to your presentation and make it more kind of modern, looks much better. But if you don't want, you can just stick to these colors and make sure that you stick to the color palette on the PowerPoint.
Okay, Dr. Hisham, please explain that to me a little again. So if you are using this color scheme, you're allowed to use the white, the black, the gray, the dark blue, the blue, like in this sequence, or how you use it?
No, you don't have to use the same sequence.
Okay.
I will talk about it in details, but you don't have
Perfect.
to use the same
Okay.
sequence. But as long as you use the colors from this line, that should be enough to make your presentation looks okay.
With the grades of the same color is fine as well, or no?
No, usually try to use this line up here. This is how they put it for you. Not all this, otherwise you'll be too much. It will be a little bit messy. They put you the most of the fitting colors up there, using their theories, which is very hard to understand.
Yeah, to make a confession or confess here, I shared this color palette with my eldest daughter. So she's learning now how to use the PowerPoint. She found it very useful, but when she asked me how I understand to use it. I said, like, I took the course with Dr. Hisham, but yet I don't find it really easy to understand the color palette. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, look, I will try to make it easier here. So let's say, for example, this is the color palette from the PowerPoint. So one of the colors is the dark. Usually there is a dark, very dark color, and usually there is a very light color in the palette itself. Okay. Usually the dark or the light colors are used for the backgrounds. So you can go for the most darkest color and use it as your background, or the lightest color and use it as your background. It depends, all right? And then the colors in between, these are the colors that you're going to use for your fonts and for your text, for your graphs or whatever. So let's say I'm going to use a dark background color. If I'm going to use a dark background, I have to make sure that my text on this dark background is light, is very light. So I can use dark background and I can use any of these colors on it. I prefer to have a very contrasting background and text.
Like so the white used here, like the white color used in this slide.
Yes, exactly. So if I use a white background, I use the very darkest color on it as my text. And then I can use other colors for my graphs or my icons and stuff like that.
Perfect.
So for example, if you move here, this color can be used on the light backgrounds. If I use the light background here, I usually use this kind of dark, a little bit dark color. This color can be used for both of them because it's sitting between the light and the dark. This one, it's better to use on the dark because it's a little bit darker than the other ones. Just to make it easy for everyone, use either a very dark background or a very light background. And according to your background, use a text that makes it really a good contrast. So this is an example. So if you have a white background, you can use a dark colors on the text or the graph. If you have a dark background, you should use light colors on the text or the graphs. I prefer, so there's a little bit of of differentiation here, they are saying that if you are in a big room and lots of audience, try to use a dark background. If you're giving a presentation to a small audience in a small room, try to use a light background. I didn't find a big difference in it. I usually use both of them in my presentation. So sometimes I use dark background and I use light background in different slides. For example, here I'm using a dark background and previously I'm using a light background. Doesn't make a big difference as long as they are really showing and there's a contrast between the text and the dark background. This is a nice site, Dr. Walid, where you can go and pick a new color palettes or new color schemes. It's called Colors, COOLORS.
Actually did that. It's really interesting one. I used it and I shared it with my daughter. It's very fruitful one. I really liked the color palettes they are sharing, and you can even download it and install it in your, unfortunately, only PowerPoint. You cannot do that in the Keynote. So if you're a Keynote user, no, I failed to do it. I don't know if it is doable or not. Maybe it's myself, but it's very good with the PowerPoint. I don't know how to do if it is doable even or not. If any of our audience succeed to do that, yeah, I would really appreciate that because I'm a Keynote user rather than PowerPoint.
I will let you know. I will check on it. I didn't know that it's hard, but I will double check it. I usually use PowerPoint. You can do lots of things on PowerPoint. Sometimes Google also presentations are very good. I never use Keynote, but I will let you know if there's a way of doing it. This is a very nice website where you can go, as you said, Dr. Walid, and pick the color scheme for it and add it in your PowerPoint and use it for later on. Inshallah, if you have time today, I will show it to you as a part of the practical part in the presentation. As you can see, we can definitely make the slide looks more colorful. Colors are very important in the slides. It makes it look fun. It makes it look important. You can highlight the important things and stuff in it. So as we said, dark background for big rooms or big audience, light background for a small audience. You don't have to stick to this one so tight. I usually use both of backgrounds in my presentation. So this is, as we were saying, user contrast in to your advantage. Don't make it difficult to read. Don't use a dark background and also dark text. It's very hard to read. The more you make a contrast, the more it's easiest to read.
Yet it's very common, again, very common mistake that we are trapped in.
I used to be trapped in this mistake, Dr. Eid, for a long time because I usually have color blindness, as I mentioned. So if I don't know if this is a big contrast or not a good contrast in my presentations before, but now as long as I'm sticking to the scheme, it makes things much easier to me. I stick to the scheme, I put the colors there from the scheme. It definitely, the presentation will look nice.
Yeah.
So if you can see here, for example, these bars, these icons that I'm using on the sides here, all of them are different colors. I can't even name that color, but all of them are different. But all of them fits the background because I use the same scheme that comes in the PowerPoint or the one that I've downloaded. I use the same scheme, and because of that, all the colors fit the background. So use high contrast for color blindness. Avoid using red and green. All right. Why avoid using red and green? Because as you know, I believe that more than 10% of men has a color blindness. More than 7 to 8% of women have color blindness, which is a good percentage. If you try to give a good presentation to all your audience, 10% of them will have color blindness. So if you try to avoid the green and the red in your presentation, it will make it much easier for the audience with color blindness because we cannot differentiate red and green. So imagine if you have few bars in the graph, one of them is red, one of them is green. Most of your audience will see the difference, but around 10% of your audience will fail to see the difference between the red and green in your chart or your bar. So this is a point if you want to keep in your mind. Same thing, also use a very high contrast colors for representation, as I mentioned. It's very important for the for the color blindness. Dr. Walid, I'm going to ask you a question. Is there a difference between, see, this is how you guys see the colors here, all right, on this slide.
Yeah.
This is how I see it on that slide. It's a huge difference, right? I believe there's a huge difference. I can't
Definitely,
tell,
yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so moving on. So these are the main guidelines of the colors. It's very easy. We said try to use the colors to engage your audience. Use the colors to highlight the important points of your slide, either graph or text. Try to be consistent. And if you want to make sure that you are consistent with your colors, use the color palette.
Mm-hmm.
Dark background for big rooms if you want, and use light backgrounds for small rooms. And use the, avoid the red and green, and make sure that you use high contrast for color blindness. So these are the main fonts guidelines and colors guidelines. Any questions before I move on to the part of the practical thing that I will start with in the PowerPoint, which is called Slide Master or Master Slide, Dr. Walid? I believe it's very important for everyone to know it before we move on. So if anyone has a question, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, for our colleagues here with us inside the Zoom rooms, you're okay to unmute yourself if you wish and ask your question verbally or with sounds. And I am following the Facebook as well. If our colleagues on the Facebook has any question, please feel free to ask, and I will transfer that immediately to Dr. Hisham. Any questions so far about the color palettes and font regulations? Okay.
Apparently it's clear. It's an easy stuff, so hopefully it's clear.
Yeah. Okay. So go ahead.
All right. This is can you see my screen, right?
Yeah, we can.
Because we are talking about the practical stuff that you can use in PowerPoint, this is a very nice trick or a hint that most of us didn't know before, and it's nice to use. This is a way where you can actually make sections in your PowerPoint. As you can see on the left side of the PowerPoint, you can make multiple sections, and under each section, you can put multiple slides. So in this way, in the PowerPoint, you can put multiple, I have like more than 200 slides, I believe here, or 100 something slides. And you can focus on whatever you want to present, and then you can close it and move on to another slide. This is if you want to make a long presentation and you can divide it into partitions and stuff like that. So this is a very nice.
Dr. Hisham, can you show us how you create that section? Because as this is again something which is not present in the keynote, and I don't actually know if I am just ignorant about it or I cannot do that. So can you guide me how you do that, like to create a new section? Is it just a right click or what you do?
Yeah, so you go under here, you right click, and once you right click, it will tell you add a section, and then you add a section and you name it. Let's say new, and now we have a new section, and make sure it's opened, and then under it you can add slide or add section, and you can start putting all the slides down here. And then you can move any slide from here to another section and so on. It's very easy. It's something that can make my whole workshop is here. It's like 6 hours of presentation. All of them are here. I just collapse whatever I'm not using and open whatever I'm using. So it's a very nice trick. It took me a while until also I figured out this section thing.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have it in Keynote again in this way. So right. I'm using both actually, but there is options in the Keynote very interesting, which I'm interested in. So I cannot move back to the PowerPoint. I used to use PowerPoint for ages, but I'm sticking to the keynote now.
Try to find it. I'm sure they will have a way of doing it.
Yeah,
maybe it's not the same way, but I'm sure they have a way of putting your presentation in sections and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yes. Correct.
And I will search for you also. I will let you know if there's a way.
Thanks very much. Okay, go ahead. We have no questions so far.
Yep. So if you allow me, I will start a new presentation here.
Okay.
My whole idea of doing that is, this is the way I start my presentations anytime. If I have a new presentation and I want to put my guidelines to make it easy for me, this is what I start with. I start with what I called master slide.
Dr. Hisham, we still watching your old presentation or the one you started with, so you can share the new one.
All right, thanks, Dr. Aid.
Yeah,
can
perfect.
you see this one?
Yes.
That's a new one. All right. So let's say that I have a new presentation that I need to start, and in my mind, I know now most of the PowerPoint guidelines, the fonts, the colors, the assertion evidence, or whatever. So instead of fixing each slide, each time I start a new slide, fixing everything in the slide every time, I go for what I call a master view. So this is a very practical part. So if you have any question, just make sure that you ask it while I'm doing it, all right? So what we do is basically we go to the toolbox in the PowerPoint, and we go to what is called view. And once we press on view, I go to what is called slide master. As I press on slide master, you can see here all the shapes of the slides that are used in the PowerPoint. These are all the different slides that they have in the PowerPoint. So this is basically, Dr. Walid, this is the backbone of the PowerPoint. So this is not your slide. This is not the slide that you are writing on. This is the backbone, the shapes of the slides that's usually in the PowerPoint. What I usually do is I remove all the slides that I'm not going to use in my presentation. For example, this slide, the one that's tilted. I will never use a slide like this. I don't know actually why they have a slide like this in the PowerPoint. So I usually just delete all the slides that I'm not going to use. I usually keep the blank slide. I usually keep this one. I don't use two tables because it's against the guidelines. It's too many text in it, so I don't use this slide. So I delete most of these slides.
So you will end up by 4 or 5 slides. Okay.
Yeah, I basically just keep the title slide. This is my main slide that we're going to use, that everybody is familiar with. I actually don't use this one also, so I will delete it. So I usually keep only 3 slides in my presentation. All right. Now, before I go much further, this is, if you can see on the left side, this is the big slide there, up there. This is the master one. All right. Anything you change in this slide, it will replicate itself in the other slides. So what I usually do is I remove all the dates.
But the opposite is not true. If you change anything in the small ones, it does not apply to the master one or to the big one.
Yeah, okay. That's right. It doesn't apply. Yeah. So I usually start by removing all the small boxes from down there because I don't use them, and I'll be using this space for my reference. So that's why I remove all the small boxes, right? Just make sure that I remove all the boxes. Good. All right, here we go. So the first thing I do is I remove all these lines because, as I said, I don't like to use lots of text in the slide. So I'm usually happy with 1 line or 2 lines in my slides. You can use more than line, but just try to keep it the same font. So that's why I remove all the other lines, because I don't need a subtitle, another subtitle, another subtitle. every time you go into subtitles, it becomes smaller and smaller and smaller. So I remove all the subtitles and I keep only one big title there, or a subtitle. I make sure that I do that in all the slides. All right. Now moving on. Now I have, I know my presentation, and in my mind, I know that I'm going to use dark background, for example, and I'm going to use a font of 60 for the headings, for example, and I'm going to use a font 34 for my subtitles, and the font of 14 for my reference. So these are the things that in my mind, I usually even write them, which color I will start with, which sizes of the fonts I usually start with. And I apply this guidelines into the main slide or the master slide. So let's say I go for the first slide and I pick a background. I pick it from up here. As you can see, I usually prefer a dark background. So you can pick whatever you have. This colors depends on the color scheme that you have picked or downloaded from before. So these colors here, Dr. Walid, if you can see, these are all my custom downloaded colors from the website that I've showed you. And these are the colors from the PowerPoint itself, from the Office PowerPoint. If I pick this custom, it will show me the background from these custom colors. If you can see, these are the dark color here, and these are the light color. So these two, the one I'm going to use for my backgrounds. So it automatically showed me in the background, showed me the light and the dark colors from this scheme. Let's say I will pick this dark background. As you can see, all the slides have changed.
Dr. Shem, let me interrupt you here because this is a bit tricky. So if you are doing that slide in your MacBook or on your computer at home, and then taking your PowerPoint presentation on a USB to present via a different computer in a conference, please make it as pack and go, because the only way to collect your videos, your fonts, your color palettes, if they are not the standard color palettes on the Office, the only way to import that with yourself on the USB is pack and go. So don't just copy your PowerPoint presentation and present it, so you'll find yourself lacking these add-on color palettes, these add-on fonts, and you may not find your videos as well. So pack and go is the safest way, if you agree with me, Dr. Hisham.
That's true, Dr. Eid. And if you have any doubts about how to pack and go and how to get the fonts and stuff, just use the usual fonts and colors in the Office background or the PowerPoint background. It can still work. I can use the colors from the Office, as you can see here. If I pick this one, I can use any of these colors here. It will change the background according to the scene.
Correct.
So you can use the one that's given to you by the PowerPoint, or use the one that you've downloaded before. All right. All right. Moving on to the title. As we said, I like to make my titles. First of all, I will pick the font. So I'm going to use Calibri. As you can see here, these are two fonts of the same typeface, Calibri and Calibri Light. So I will use the Calibri for the headings, and I will use Calibri Light for the subtitles or the small titles here. And then I'm going to make it 60. This is a 60. And I'll make it bold. And then I'm going to change the color. As you can see here, it gave me the palette that I have downloaded. These are the palette that I have downloaded, and it's giving me the colors that fit my background. So I can use this one because it's light. I can use this one because it's light, or I can use one of these light colors here. I can use this one for my title. And then if I can go here, I can make this one 34, as we mentioned. or 36. And I will use this color for my titles. If you see, it's the same thing in each slide now.
Yeah, it has automatically changed.
Automatically changed. All right.
Yeah.
One more trick before we go for the reference, which is very important. If you have an icon or a logo of your company or your presentation or your office, and you want to add it here, it's a good way of doing it in the master slide. So let's say, for example, I will insert a picture from my computer, and let's say I will pick any of my logos, for example. Let's say I will pick this one. So if I add my logo here, it should go to the main one. So let's say I'll just cut it from here and go to the main slide. This is the main slide here. And then if I add my my logo, and let's say, for example, put it here.
It will apply to all. Okay.
Yeah, it depends. You can put it down or up to you. But as you can see, once you put it here, it will show in all the slides. So you don't have to fit it every time in each slide when you do your presentation later on. It just stays there. Yeah. All right. So let's make it a little bit easy.
Yep. Dr. Hisham, you removed the numbers, the slide numbers. Is that for a reason? Because
yeah, like intentionally I do that.
Oh yes. So let me disagree, if it's okay with you. I think one of the guidelines when you're applying for the Caesar application, which I do, they are asking for two important things: the number of slides and the date this presentation was given at. So you can put the date of the presentation in the first slide, which is fine. But the number of slides, they need that to be organized. I don't know if this is still apply with the new regulations, because you're submitting all your evidence now as an electronic submission. But previously it is still in the guidelines. I don't know if they're still like very strict with it or not. So if you're submitting, I don't know if this is valuable for everything or not, but I just need to know what's your rationale to remove the number of slides.
Yeah. All right. So I'll tell you what's the difference. If we are submitting a presentation, I do agree with you. You need to put the numbers and the dates on it, which is fine. But if you are just presenting your presentation, you're not submitting it to any association or any body. I believe it's not so good. Why? Because first of all, you can present the same presentation in different times. After a month, after a year, you can present the same presentation. So you don't want to have the same date of the presentation that's been sitting there for 1 year or something. That's number one. Number two, I usually, in the way I do my presentations, which I will show you in the next few minutes, I usually have a huge number of slides. My presentation, because I try to make each slide carries only one message. And because I will show you another trick that makes the slide looks easy and the animation looks easy, I will have to duplicate the slides, sometimes 1 or 2 times. So if I use, for example, my slide is, let's say, usually it's around 24 or 30 slides. This is the main presentation. And then to make the guidelines and the tricks of the PowerPoint and to make my slide looks nice during the presentation, I usually have to duplicate my slides for doing the tricks. So one slide
for
can
animations.
be into 3 slides,
yeah.
which means that it will be around 90 or 80 slides. What happens is that once you start your presentation and the audience can see the number of slides down there, 80 slides, they usually say, oh my God, it's shocking. And they get this impression that no way we'll continue this presentation and they stop watching it. So that's why from the start, I removed totally the number of slides. It does give them a big shock. At the same time, I don't find it really important unless you are submitting it to a body and they need to know exactly how many slides you'll be watching or something like that.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. Yep.
Good. Okay.
All right, good. So now we went to the master slide. We have added the title. We have added our icon. We have added the. Let's just let me move this one a little bit. I can't see it. So we've added the icon and everything there in the slide. We've checked it. We've checked this. And let's move to the reference. References are very important. So what do we do with the reference? If you can see here, there's something called insert placeholder. If you go to this insert placeholder, Dr. Walid, and you press on it, you get a new content.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is I go there under this slide and I draw the content, the box. And then I delete all these things that we mentioned before. This will be my reference box. This is where it's gonna sit in all the slides. So what I do is I write a reference or references. And I make it, as we said in the guidelines, I make it 14. You can make it colored, you can keep it blank, it's up to you. I don't use a bold for the references. And then important stuff is that after you do this, you go to Home. And in Home, you'll find align text. And you press bottom just to bring the references down. So this is top, middle, and bottom. You press bottom. The idea of that is that every time you add a reference, and then you add a new one, the old one goes under it, and the new one goes on top of it, and so on. Right?
Okay, and I'm sure that our audience here understand reference does not necessarily mean this paper is referenced from this source. Even if you are using an image or a video, you have to put the reference and watch for your copyrights for anything you are doing. That's very important, particularly if you're publishing that in an international meeting. You need to submit everything with reference. And you can use copyright-free easily from when you Google it, just when you select images, instead of under you're searching from Google, and then press tools, and from tools there's usage rights, and then you can pick what rights, is it all or the ones with common license, or one is licensed for commercial license, and you can follow the regulations of each. But again, don't use anything without mentioning the reference. That's a bad point in your presentation, if I'm right, Dr. Hisham.
Yeah, exactly, Dr. Walid. And because, as we mentioned, the guidelines, we try to avoid texts as much as possible. So most of the slides will be, you will have to use shapes, icons, videos, and stuff like that. Everything you put in your slide should have a reference to it. Everything. Even if you get an icon from Google or a shape or an image from anywhere or from any research or a paper abstract, always put a reference to it.
Yes. Dr. Mahfouz is asking to repeat that again. You can search on the Google, for example, if you write circulatory system or circulation or anything like that, and then you press search, then you will go for images. If you press images, you will find on the right of the screen item or a button called tools. If you press tools, it will come 5 sub buttons. One of them is usage rights. Under this usage rights, you can say all, so you're seeking by any type of usage rights or Creative Commons licenses. I'm reading from in front of me now, or commercials and other license. And once you press that, it will reduce your search as per your choice. So you cannot use every single image as if it's copyright free. You have to read the copyrights of the images that you're using. And you mentioned that the reference, if it is free to use for you, otherwise you need to pay for your photo or image, if that's clear enough, Dr. Mahfouz. Okay, please go ahead, Christian.
Dr. Walid, just also to make it easier for everyone, because I know this how to search with Google free rights or copyrights free. It does make things a little bit hard. I will show your guests a very nice few websites so they can use for copyright free images, shapes, and videos just by clicking whatever they want, just going through this website, and it's totally free website. If you don't mind,
It's awesome.
just remind me after we finish this master slide, I will show it to your audience, inshallah.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so we've put the references under our slide. This is very important, okay? And we changed the color of the slide. We've changed the fonts. We are happy with everything. And after we do that, we go to, this is our slide master. And then what we do is we just close the master view. All right? So we close it. And now once we close it, we are back to the usual frame of the PowerPoint. And let's test what we have done. If I go to a new slide, every time I press a new slide, the whole guidelines that we fixed in the master slide will come on, with everything ready for me to start my presentation. So if I write here, this, let's say my headline, and this is my subtitle.
Yeah.
And let's say I add another slide.
Yeah, and it saves you a lot of time and effort from changing every single slide separately.
Yeah. And everything, the title is in the same position. My references are in the same position. So if you write in the reference, and this is slide, and then I go there. So it will be the same. And then if we go, for example, and try to check how it looks, this is how it would look. And then if I move to the second slide, my references are in the same place, same fonts, everything is same. This is what we call hierarchy. So to build your hierarchy, you have to do the master slide from the scratch. Is that clear for everyone?
Fantastic. That's very clear, Dr. Hisham. Just to emphasize this point of references, one of my YouTube videos in the conference was actually blocked by YouTube because I did not mention the reference of the introductory music mentioned in the first 30 seconds of the conference. So just the introduction, just the music in the first 30 seconds, they blocked my YouTube video and they said there is copyright claim. And I had to go, thank God, they are giving me the option and guided me what to do. So I went to this music in the first 30 seconds of the video and I muted it completely. So they allowed this video to be live. So if you're doing any live videos for YouTube channel or anything like that, that's very sensitive content. Okay, thank you, Dr. Hisham. Please go ahead.
By the way, Dr. Reed, also for your reference and for your guest, in YouTube, they have now an audio where you can add directly from YouTube itself.
Yeah.
And it's totally copyright free. All right, so before I forget, I will show you the one that I'm using for my shapes and icons, the websites. Can you see my screen, Dr. Reed? Can you see my Google?
Yeah, I can see your Google, yeah.
Good. All right, so maybe your audience can write this after me if they want, because, or I can send it to them later on. The first website is called Flaticon.
That's for the icons, isn't it? Yeah, I tested that. It's a nice one.
It's a very nice one. It gives you everything. So you were mentioning cardiovascular system. So let's say, for example, the heart, for example. And you can use, they'll give you all the icons for the hearts and stuff. Everything there. Yeah. And you can use it for free. All these are copy free. You can use, for example, pain. If you want to put an icon of pain. Anything there is copyright free. So this is Fraticon. I use it most of the time. The other one is called Pixabay. So Pixabay, you get lots of images where you can use for your presentation. You can use these images for the background, or if it's related to your topic, it's up to you. So Pixabay also gives you lots of, and they have videos where you can use it also for your, all these things are copyright free, and they are free. They are free to download.
Good.
Yeah, these are the main one I use. There's also a free pick. FreePic also has lots of images and stuff like that you can use. All of these are free also. And then the last one, which I usually use so much, is Pexels. Free stock photos and videos.
But Pixel is not free completely. I think there is a paid section of it.
All of these websites, they have some of the photos and videos that you have to pay for, but most of them are free. Yeah. So you can use just the free. Yeah. Good. All right. All right. Any questions in the master slide? Everybody's happy?
Yeah, please feel free to unmute yourselves. You have the privilege of unmuting yourself. Our colleagues from شعبة أطباء التخدير, you're free to ask on the Facebook page, and I will transfer your comments or your question to Dr. Hisham.
All right, good.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on, Dr. Walid, to Richard Mayer's theory. I wanted just everybody to know that, but it doesn't have to be really hard. So I'll just try to make it as easy as possible. All right. So Richard Mayer's are the main, what to use the source for the guidelines of the online PowerPoint presentations. Everybody is using Richard Mayer's now. Richard Mayer is one of the most produced educational psychologists in the world. I believe he had more than 300 publications and more than 30 books, something like that. He made lots of studies and researches in learning and education. What are the best ways for audience to get the information and to understand it and to memorize it? He had lots of publications in this stuff. So he's considered like the godfather for the online presentations.
Good.
And he developed 12 principles. He developed 12 principles for the multimedia learning or online presentations. We'll go through them very quickly, Dr. Walid.
Yeah, we highlighted these principles and discussed them previously.
I believe Dr. Magdi Khalil went through them.
We did. Yeah, احنا حتى اتناقشنا فيهم بالعربي واتكلمنا فيهم مرتين ثلاثة, يعني it was killed. Yeah, but like you are welcome to highlight, to exchange knowledge as well. Yeah,
it's very important to understand them. So the first principle is coherence. And basically meaning people learn better when extraneous words, pictures, and sounds are excluded rather than included. In an easy way or in a nutshell is that if in your slide there are any words or pictures or sounds that are not related or wouldn't add a benefit to your slide, just get it out of the way and remove it from the slide. Basically reducing the text and the words and pictures, anything that doesn't add the benefit or extra information to your slide, just take it out of the slide. So this is number one, which is called coherence. Signaling, which is the second principle, highlighting the important points or stuff in your slides. And this is where the hierarchy comes in play, Dr. Walid. So the hierarchy that we put, how we differentiate the points by bolding them by different text, by different size. This is a kind of signaling, all right? Number 3, redundancy. Redundancy means don't put 3 ways don't put one information in different 3 ways in the same slide. So don't put an information as a picture and as a text and say it on the same time. So if you have an information, don't present it in 3 ways. That's too much for the brain to gather the information and to memorize it. Just use 1 or 2 way of presenting your point. This is the idea of redundancy, all right?
And in my CV, how to write your CV presentation, I think it contains just 6 or 7 words, and otherwise it will all slides, all photos or pictures. So like all my slides were just photos and pictures. There was no, and I'm talking on the picture. Definitely, yes, Dr. Hisham, yes. Like the mindset is completely changed. I was doing most of these concepts, but you know, like I didn't know that there is a principle behind. I was just watching the experts and doing like them without knowing the real principle behind. So, but
yeah, exactly.
Like fake it till you make it. هو دي القاعدة اللي انت بتشوف المحترفين والكبار بيشتغلوا ازاي، وبعدين تفهم القاعدة بعد كده on the go يعني.
We copy them until we know exactly the details. Yeah, that's true. All right. So number 4, the 4th principle is spatial contiguity. This is important, Dr. Ali, because we usually, when we use a diagram in the presentation, we try to put numbers on them and list the names on the side, or we try to put the names with an arrows pointing to the organs or to specific points of the diagram. In spatial contiguity, it's saying that try to put the names very close to what you are aiming or pointing to. So let's say, for example, you are talking about the right ventricle. I try to write the name of the right ventricle inside the right ventricle. Don't write it far and use an arrow to point at the right ventricle, or write, for example, number 1 and then write it down there in a list. So the best way for the mind to remember or to recall information like this is to have the name of the organ or the body on top of it or very close to it, like this.
And this is not uncommon as well, Dr. Hisham, to put arrows. I think this is more common even, yeah, than putting everything inside the photo that it applies to. أعتقد إن ده من الحاجات الأخطاء الشائعة عندنا اللي إحنا بنعملها، لأن يمكن الصورة حجمها بيكون صغير وإحنا عايزين نحط تكست جنب الصورة، فنقول التكست ونشرح على الصورة، فالصورة حجمها صغير فتحط أرز تمثل ده. فأعتقد أنت الموضوع بيتحول لبيزار في الآخر، وأعتقد كلنا ترابد في الميستيك دي. أنا لما برجع على للبرزنتيشن بتاعي من 3 سنين و4 سنين على التشانل بلاقي إن أنا عملت الأخطاء دي كلها يعني بقوة وبلا منازع، يعني عارف من أكتر الأخطاء اللي عملتها يعني. بس المشكلة إن أخطائي كلها متسجلة.
إن شاء الله. You can change all your slides again.
ما أقدرش أنكرها. لا هغير إيه ولا إيه ده، أنا كنت بعمل فضايح.
إن شاء الله برضه لو في وقت النهارده إن شاء الله, if you have time, I'll show you a nice way also of enlarging your photos and make it clear, and then you can add the names to it and the text to it إن شاء الله. لو الأودينس عندهم وقت ومستحملين يعني. أنا عارف ساعات الكلام
هنعمل فوت إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله. The 5th principle is temporal contiguity, meaning that the point that you are talking about is the point that should be highlighted in the screen. They should be going simultaneously. If I'm talking about redundancy, then it should be highlighted in the screen while I'm talking. If I'm talking about signaling, this one should be highlighted and the other shouldn't be that clear while I'm talking about any point. This is a nice thing that inshallah I will show it to you later after this presentation, how to use this way of temporal contiguity by making the point highlighted and the other points kind of faded behind the main point.
in this point in particular, Dr. Hisham, I found the way you're doing that in PowerPoint presentation is too hard compared to what happens in the Keynote. So Keynote makes that in just one step like that. Just all what you need is to how to appear and how to disappear, and it will make it in a couple of seconds for all, and then you can copy and paste your animation to all the slides. So you do that in less than 15 seconds for all the slides.
Yes, but the problem, Dr. Walid, with the animation, so the animation is the same thing in the PowerPoint. The problem with the animation is that, let's say, for example, I'm talking about coherence. And now if I move on to signaling, what will happen is signaling will appear, right? Coherence will stay there. If I want to remove the coherence and only show the signaling, I will have to do at least 3 animations. Show the coherence, then show the signaling, and make the coherence disappear, which means that I'm going to use 3 animations in one slide, in one step only. At the end of the slide, you will find that you have to use at least 5 to 6 animations in one slide, which becomes very confusing when you are presenting. Because sometimes when you click stuff, it makes like animation goes in and out, and to make it, it's going to be a little bit hard. At the same point, I don't want the audience to forget the coherence. So let's say, for example, I'm talking about redundancy. I still want them to see the coherence and signaling in my slide, but I want it to be faded a little bit so that they focus on the redundancy. But at the same point, at the same time, they can still see the coherence and signaling. So you can do the temporal contiguity with the animation. That's very good. But if you want to do it in a really nice way, it's better to do it like that. Highlight the one that you're talking about, and the other points just a little bit fade on the background. And you cannot do that with the animation, either in Keynote or the
in the Keynote. I do that with animation
because they are asking.
Yes, they are asking you how much you want to disappear. Is it complete, like 0%, or grading of that? Like you may use 20% or something. I don't know if that's available in PowerPoint or not, but it's doable in Keynote. You can, yeah, but not in the animation. I will show you audience a nice way of doing it in the PowerPoint. Okay. It should be easy, inshallah. Can do that practically. Inshallah. Segmenting is basically saying that when you have a long presentation or a long unit, just try to segment it and make it subdivided. He's talking about the online courses. When we do an online course, usually what we do is we make a part of the online course, and after the learner finished this part, the other part will show on, and so on. So he finished the second part, and then the third part shows on. They call it drip in or drip it. So learning by dripping, information by information. He's basically talking about the online courses, so it doesn't really fit with the online presentations, but it's still something that you should know about Richard Mayer principles. Pre-training, I think this is something that we all do in our training. If you have a training, you can sometimes give some pre-reading to your audience. You can, before starting the presentation, you can tell them about the main points that you will do in the presentation. You can tell them about some difficult words or difficult items that they have to understand before you go into more depth in the presentation. So he was saying that basically people understand the presentation if you give them heads up before, or some pre-training about the different names and the points that you use, or the concepts that you use in the slides. Modality. As we said, the whole idea of modality is try to avoid on-screen text or lots of animation. So he's saying if you're going to use some animations, don't use too many animations, Dr. Walid. Like the one that spin in and spin out and all these things on the text, and it rotates and all this stuff. Don't use that. Just use the fading in and out, or just the animation, the usual animation. This is number one. And also he's saying here, try to use the graphics more than text with your voice. So graphics on the slide and your voice, instead of using the animation or lots of screen text.
This is a very important point in his
Yeah, I think that was in the history of PowerPoint presentations. All of us did that when we started our very first PowerPoint presentation. We thought that we need to make use of every single privilege in the PowerPoint presentations. We have to do that. We have to do this, and like with maturity, starts to be less and less. This is how I think,
audience, my audience used to get dizzy from all the spinning I'm doing in the and the slides comes out. I stopped doing that for a while now, which is better.
Good.
All right, multimedia. He's saying also the ninth principle is if you're going to use any letters or any text in your presentation, in your slide, try to add some pictures to it or icons to it. So for example, here I can write multimedia, and I can just show you people learn better from words and pictures than from words alone. But he's saying, according to his principle, if I add a photo to it, or icon or shape, that makes learning much better. I think apparently because the mind will remember the image that's related to the text. That's why it will make it easier for the mind to remember this. So if I say multimedia and I show you this shape, and then I use the text, this is a good way of learning. All right, so this is the ninth principle of multimedia.
Let me stop you here, Dr. Shyam, because I don't understand. Is there any contradiction between this rule and the rule number 3 or 4 when he advised not to use audio, image, and text in the same time? I don't remember if this was the rule number 3 or rule number 4. Don't use all of them, the words, the photo, and your narration or your speaking in the same time. He recommended against that. So
yes, exactly.
Is there a contradiction between this and multimedia, or this is some different concept?
No, it's the same concept, but the way you present it. So let's say, for example, I want to show here the image and the text. What I do is I show the image only without the text, and then I talk about it, for example. And then after I do that, I show the text for the audience, and I don't read the text. I let them read it by themselves, for example. So I don't combine at the same time all the 3 stuff. You got what I mean?
Yes. So this is what we call stamping, like to confirm the same idea by 2 different techniques. One is narration plus image, followed by words or text as 2 different steps to highlight the same piece of knowledge. Am I right with that? Exactly. So don't use the 3 together. You can use them in 2 different steps, just to re-memorize it or to memorize it better. Good. Now I can understand it.
Read it. Yeah, so here I can say to the audience, and then I can leave these words down there for a few seconds while I'm not talking, and then they can read it just to add an extra layer of information.
Perfect. That makes a lot of sense now. Okay.
Okay, good. I think we have a few comments if anybody wants to ask something before.
Yeah, so Hani is saying that was number 3, the redundancy rule. I agree.
I love it, which means that people are really watching.
Yes, they are really focused here. Good. You left an impression, Dr. Hisham. Good.
Alhamdulillah. Good. All right. Moving on to the 10th point. I hope it's clear now, Dr. What was the one who asked about this? I hope it's clear. The point now it's more clear.
Yeah, it's very clear now. Yeah, crystal clear.
Number 10 is the personalization. Personalization is an easy stuff that we don't use at all. It's basically saying that if you are talking to your audience, try to involve them in the conversation. Try to make the conversation about your audience. So let's say, for example, just a simple way of doing it, because it's a little bit complicated, but if we put it in a simple way, it may make sense. Let's say if I want to say that the risk factors of heart attack is high cholesterol and high blood pressure, for example. So instead of saying patients can have heart attacks if they have high blood pressure or if they have high cholesterol level, instead of saying that, I may actually involve my audience in the speech. So I will say, you can have a heart attack if you have a high cholesterol level or a high blood pressure. or we can have, or you can have. Make it more kind of personalized speech than just a speech that's not involving them. You can do that in a different way. You just get the idea and try how to do it. You can involve them in the case discussion. You can involve them in anything. This is how I address the audience. I try to make them involved in my presentation. So instead of saying the heart beats 60 beats per minute, I will say your heart beats 60 beats per minute. Just a way of involving them, make it more personalization. They can feel it in themselves. Is that clear?
Yes.
All right. Any questions before I move on?
We can go ahead.
Good. All right. The 11th principle is called the voice. And this also reflects to the online presentations or online courses, basically. So we noticed lately in the last few years that there's been lots of courses that use the robot or machine voice. He's
Which
saying
I
that
hate.
this is not...
Which I hate. I much hate this one. I don't
exactly.
like it. Don't
And
like
this is against the main principles and the guidelines. Never use a machine voice in your presentation or your course. Just use a friendly human voice. There are kind of improvement in this aspect, Dr. Walid. There are some softwares now where you can use a human voice, but it's also automated, like automated human voice instead of machine voice. But anyway, just to make it easy, try to avoid machine voice as much as possible.
There's actually companies that do the narrations as a project for you as paid narrations. So if you're really interested, do that with real human rather than automatic or automated narrations.
That's right.
But it's not one of the cheap ones on the internet. One of the most expensive projects you can pay for is English narration for a PowerPoint presentation, and you will pay per minute or by word. Like this is 50 cents per word or $3 per minute, something like that. So it's not a cheap one, but it's available anyway.
If any of your audience are interested, I have a software which I can use human voice for narration, and it's mine. I have a copyright for it. So if anybody is interested who's having online course or something, I can help him with that.
This is the first one interested here, Hisham.
Alas, a deal. I have a copyright for this software.
You have the first customer here. Okay.
Yeah. And also have a copyright for musics that you can use also for your presentation and stuff. So yeah, in case anybody is interested, Dr. Reed, we'll have a discussion later on.
Okay. Yeah. Very good.
Your image doesn't have to be in your presentation. All right. I'm not sure this is contradicting with what we do in the Zoom or no. On Zoom presentation where we are showed on the slides or on the side of the presentation. But according to Richard Mayer, try to avoid the speaker's image. It doesn't add anything to the slide. It doesn't help in memorizing anything. All right. Just this is his 12th principle, just to be aware of.
And we are talking about static image, Dr. Hisham. So there's no point if I am not presenting this presentation online with my video. So there's no point to leave my image in the background. So it's just either myself with video plus the PowerPoint presentation or none and only PowerPoint presentation.
Makes sense. Makes sense, Dr.
Yeah.
I think that you're right upon that.
Yeah.
All right. Good. Moving on. This is the multimedia principle. All right. Just to make it easy for everyone. Even myself, I don't memorize the 12 principles in my mind and try to remember each principle when I'm putting my presentation. What I do is I stick to few things that makes it easier for me to do my presentation. I try to avoid lots of texts. I try to put lots of images and icons in my slides. I stick to the font and the color guidelines. And I'll show you the few tricks where you, as we said, show the animation or something like that. And I also use the how to increase, to zoom in my pictures and my videos, and that's it. And also, of course, the assertion evidence approach, which we talked about in the first slide. If I use this stuff in my presentation, I'm almost 80 or 90% fulfilling all the principles of Richard Meyer. All right, clear? Good.
Perfect.
Any questions before we take a break? 5 minutes.
We don't have any questions or comments here. So how much remaining for you, Dr. Hisham?
I will show you, I finished the main thing. I will show you how to use that transparency, because I believe it's very important for everyone to use it. It makes things more clear in the presentation.
Okay.
And if we don't have time, I think that would be it. And then all your guests are invited to attend the workshop and things like that if they want to have more details.
Perfect. So I think let's go ahead. I know that this rule takes like 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah. So we'll go straight away to that one, and then we'll close the session after.
All right.
Unless you need to go for a break yourself, Dr. Hisham, that's different kettle of fish.
That's fine. I've got my water here. That's important.
Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead straight away. Perfect. Thanks very much.
That's always. All right. So let's move on to all right. I will make actually.
So this part coming, dear colleagues, here is a very practical part, very beneficial if you're using the PowerPoint presentation to zoom into specific part of your image or your table or your graph. So I really strongly recommend you stay with us these 10 minutes if you're interested in this part or in this section. They're almost finished. Thanks very much for attendance tonight.
All right, here we go. So let's say I have this slide, Dr. Walid, and according to the previous guidelines and the principles that we talked about, I need to make my audience focus on one point only while I'm talking to them. If I leave the slide like this and even imagine, let's actually get a better slide, which we can. Yep, let's use this one. All right, so let's say I have a slide with few texts, all right? And I need to talk to my audience about each point in this text, but I need them to focus on the point that I'm talking about. If I use the animation, which is like here, it can be all right. Kindly, my advice is if you are going to use any of the animations, just make sure that you only use the appear or the fade animation. So here's the one that you're talking about, Dr. Reed. I think it's the fade one. I believe so. Maybe different thing in Keynote.
It's different in the Keynote, yeah.
It's different, yeah. But if anybody wants to use the animation, which we can use still, use only the appear or fade in animation. Don't use any of the other animation, all right? But I'm going to show you a different way here, or how I do it. Feel free to use it or use different way. So what I usually do is I finish my slide, and then I go to insert shapes, and I pick the square, and then I cover my text. And then I use the colors, the same color from the template that I have from the scheme, to change the color of the box. And then I go to shape outline and make no outline. If I leave it
so you're using the same background, color of background with no line. Same color of the background with no line. Perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. All right. So now I have the slide which looks like I don't have any text on it. Also, one of the good things about this, Dr. Walid, is that we use what we call, what do you call this one? I forgot. There is a psychology principle that we, Zeigarnik effect. So the Zeigarnik effect saying that if you put few points, this is the implication or the applying the Zeigarnik effect in the PowerPoint. If you put few points for the audience and you start talking about the first point, their mind will be very curious to recognize the second and the third point. So they will be always hooked and interested in your slide until you fulfill the left points. So this is one of the nice ways of keeping the audience hooked to your slide. And this, it doesn't happen with the animation also, Dr. Walid, or it can happen, I don't know about the keynote, but I always keep my icons on the side so that the audience, first of all, know that I will be talking about 3 points. This is number 1. Number 2, they cannot wait. The mind keep on working and waiting for the other 2 points to be released to go in peace. Basically, that's the whole idea of the Zeigarnik effect. So they keep on hooked to my presentation. Right. So after I do that, I duplicate my slide. That's why I told you, Dr. Walid, sometimes the number of the slides goes beyond beyond the limit.
Now I understand.
Yeah. And now I go here, and this is the first slide. Okay. Now the second slide, I go here and I put down my curtain. I call it a curtain. Right. So I pull it down. Okay. And then I go to the third slide and I pull it down further. All right. So now I have 2 points. I should duplicate it one more time. And then this is my last point. All right. Now what I do is, in the practical way, is I take this box and I put it up. And I go to shape format. And if you go to shape format, you will find the transparency. And I pick a number. Usually I use number 13, but feel free to use any number. All right. All right. Now I have this slide with the third point, the last point, and then the previous 2 points are still there, but they are not that clear. The audience can still go back to them if they want, but they will definitely be hooked on my last point, which I'm talking about. And then what I do is I copy this one and I go to the previous slide and I paste it and I make sure that I only cover the previous point. And that's it. So at the end of the day, Dr. Walid, it will show like that. Oh. This is the main slide. And then when I click, right click, the usual moving on to the second slide, I'll be talking about this point. Now the audience are focused on this point and they have the Zeigarnik effect for the next 2 points. And then I move on to the next slide. Now they are forced to focus on this point, which I'll be talking about. And then the previous point will be faded and so on. And I can move their eyes with me. If I want to go back again, I can do like that. Which is very hard to do also with the animation, Dr. Ali. So if you want to go back again to the other point, it will be much easier. And then, as I'm sure your eyes are moving with my points now. So this is a nice way that you can put lots of principles of Richard Meyer in one slide.
Very good.
Is it clear
Makes
for everyone?
a lot of sense. Any questions? Is this point clear? You can go back to this video 2 or 3 times to focus on the exact technique doing that, but you're welcome to ask any questions. You're allowed to open your mics. Is that clear enough? Just give us any signal. Perfect.
Good.
We have no signals yet, so I don't know if it's clear or not.
I talked it. I went through it very quickly, but as you said, it will be there, so they can go back to it at any time.
It will be in the recorded video anyway. Perfect.
Right.
So,
there's a question or?
Fantastic. Thanks, Dr. Hannibal. No, that's just thumbs up. It's clear. Fantastic.
Thumbs up. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
I think I think we are done here, Dr. Walid, and we talked today about the fonts and the colors guidelines. We talked about the principles of Richard Mayer. We talked about the master slide, which is very important. And we talked about how to do this animation to make your presentation much more clear for the audience. I think I'm done
Perfect.
for today, and hopefully everybody liked the presentation. I'm happy to receive any questions, either through you, Dr. Walid, or through my Facebook page. Happy to answer them anytime.
And if you need more details about Dr. Hisham's course on it's available, and he has a special discount for Saving Lives Academy, so you can get the code via myself or via Dr. Hisham if you are interested. So again, Dr. Hisham, thanks very much, and Dr. Magdi Khalil, Professor Magdi Khalil as well. I would really express my sincere thanks to both of you to enrich us with this knowledge, and even with practice. And I would like to say thanks very much on behalf of all colleagues, attendees from Shu'abat al Tahdir or from my Facebook page. And I promise we'll continue to offer the highest quality of teaching. And see you in the next event after Ramadan, inshallah. Thanks again, Dr. Hisham, and thanks, Prof. Magdi Khalil, even if you are not able to attend with us tonight, but your spirit and soul is with us tonight. So that's the end of this basic and brief knowledge of medical education. Thanks all our attendees tonight. Thanks all our attendees on the Facebook page. And I will post this video as soon as I can after processing and montaging the original ones. So expect it tonight or maximum by tomorrow. If it's not available by tonight, don't be upset or afraid that it wouldn't be available. It will be available as soon as I can. Hisham, thanks very much. I know it's the morning now in Australia, so it's your time with the family and kids. Yeah. Enjoy your time. Have a good weekend. Thanks so much, and thanks for being with us.
For your guests. كل عام وانتم بخير يا سيدي.
Thanks very much, Dr. Hisham. Jazakallah khair. One message is this lectures will be on YouTube. Dr. Fatma Goma, thanks for your comment. It made me the chance to explain. So all this product of brief knowledge of medical education is available on Saving Lives Academy YouTube channel. And if you go to savinglivesacademy.com, there is more than 6 or 7 free courses, like very good courses. I am biased with these courses, but like they are absolutely for free. So go and have a look on savinglivesacademy.com, and you will find all our products available completely for free, except the paid courses, which are only 3 courses. So, and I can give a good news now. There is a plan after Ramadan, inshallah, to make Saving Lives Academy a non-profit organization or non-for-profit organization in Ireland. I started making some connections and communication with lawyer and accountant to make that happen as soon as I can. So best of luck for you all, and see you after Ramadan, inshallah, and new products from Saving Lives Academy. Again, thanks, Dr. Hisham, and see you soon with a different product. Thanks. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Inshallah. Alaikum salam. Thank you, Dr.